All right, the political aspects of the progressive era are interesting. Now, unlike today where the Republicans are conservative and the Democrats are progressive, in the 1900s, both parties were pursuing progressive agendas. Now, during the Gilded Age, the country was in a kind of political malaise. Presidents did not have clear-cut political mandates from the people. Now, it wasn't until the reform movement began to take shape and one particular president occupied the White House that things began to change in America. Now, Theodore Roosevelt, a reform-minded politician, made a name for himself in local New York state politics. As a New York State Assemblyman, he was instrumental in passing the New York State Civil Service Act of 1883. Now, this is the first state civil service act in the nation. His willingness to challenge the corruption in New York politics gained national attention at that time. Now, President Benjamin Harrison, 1889 to 1893, appointed Roosevelt as the U.S. Civil Service Commissioner in 1889. As commissioner, Roosevelt had three guiding principles of reform. Opportunity should be made equal for all citizens. Only those who had merit should be appointed to federal jobs. And public servants should not suffer from their political beliefs. Now, in 1894, Roosevelt was offered the job of police commissioner of New York City. Roosevelt instituted regular inspections of firearms, annual physical exams, appointed recruits based on their physical and mental qualifications rather than their political affiliation, and he had telephones installed in the station houses. He would walk the patrol beats of officers late at night and early in the morning to ensure that his officers were on the job and not doing some nefarious corruption. Now, in 1897, President McKinley appointed Roosevelt Assistant Secretary of the Navy. Now, when the battleship Maine blew up in Havana Harbor, Roosevelt enthusiastically advocated for war with Spain. He resigned his position as Assistant Secretary of Navy, volunteered for duty with the 1st Volunteer Cavalry, and went to Cuba. He became a national hero with that charge of Kettle Hill and the capture of San Juan Hill. By the time he returned home, the Republicans in New York State selected him to be the Republican candidate for the governor of New York, which they were going to regret, trust me. Now, Roosevelt won the election with only a 1% margin, but as far as he was concerned, he had a mandate from the people and he began instituting reforms at the state level. Roosevelt became widely popular throughout the nation, not just New York, but the nation. However, the Republican power brokers in New York decided one term was enough. So, in the 1900 presidential election, they pushed for Roosevelt to be McKinley's running mate. Now, the influential Republican senator from Ohio, Mark Hanna, who's also McKinley's campaign manager, was against it. He hated Roosevelt. He thought he was dangerous. Now, McKinley won re-election with Roosevelt on the ticket. The New York Republican Party was happy because Roosevelt was no longer involved in state politics. However, Senator Hanna stated, "There's only one life between that madman and the presidency." McKinley was only 6 months into his second term when he was assassinated. Now, when Hanna heard the news, it is alleged that he said, "Now look, that damn cowboy is president of the United States." Now, as president, Theodore Roosevelt ushered in the progressive age. He advocated for the square deal. Now, this was his domestic policy of conservation of natural resources, control of corporations, and consumer protection. They called it the 3 C's. Now, during his presidency, Roosevelt established approximately 230 million acres of public lands between 1901 and 1909, including 150 national forests, the first 55 federal bird reservations and game preserves, 5 national parks, and the first 18 national monuments in 1905. Roosevelt created the U.S. Forest Service and Gifford Pinchon as the first chief forester. Now, Pinchon was one of the earliest conservationists in the United States. He graduated from Yale in 1889. He traveled throughout Europe, where he met and studied under leading European foresters. Coming back to the United States, he began his career in forest conservation. Now, he was the principal advisor to Theodore Roosevelt on conservation of forest and land. Now, the Grand Canyon was probably one of Roosevelt's greatest acts of conservation ever, and I mean ever. You see, Roosevelt could put land under federal ownership under the Forest Reserve Act of 1891, but the power to create national parks resided with Congress. Now, when he visited the Grand Canyon, he said, "Let this great wonder of nature remain as it is now. Do nothing to mar its grandeur, sublimity, and loveliness." Okay, he's got a problem now. See, the only thing he could do to preserve the grandeur was to declare the bottom of the canyon as a forest reserve in 1903. But that left the rest of the area open to development. However, the Antiquities Act of 1906 contained language that tried to limit national monuments to the smallest area compatible with proper care and management of the object to be protected. Well, the mistake Congress made was giving Roosevelt the power to declare national monuments by executive order. Oh boy, did he. The president also had the authority to decide what the smallest area of land would be required. That was all Roosevelt needed. He declared the walls of the Grand Canyon a national monument and the land around it compatible with proper care and maintenance of the object to be protected. Now, between 1901 and 1909, Roosevelt put more land under federal protection than all the presidents that would succeed him. Now, the second C of Roosevelt's square deal was control of corporations. Towards the end of the 19th century, trusts came to dominate a number of major industries, destroying competition. A trust is an arrangement by which stockholders in several companies transfer their shares to a single set of trustees. Now, in exchange, the stockholders receive a certificate entitling them to a specified share of the consolidated earnings of the jointly managed companies. Great for the stockholders, bad for the people. Now, the Sherman Antitrust Act that was passed in 1890 authorized the federal government to bring a lawsuit against trusts in order to dissolve them. Specifically, any combination in the form of trust or otherwise that was in restraint of trade or commerce among several states or with foreign nations was declared illegal. Now, for the first 10 years, the legislation was not very effective, but when Roosevelt took office, things started to change. In 1902, TR had a Supreme Court that was sympathetic to his cause. This was his time to take down the monopolies. So in February of 1902, Roosevelt launched his campaign of trust busting. He went after Northern Securities. Now, this trust controlled the majority of railroad shipping across the northern United States. Now, the head of the trust was J.P. Morgan. It is alleged that when Morgan found out about the lawsuit, he said, "Why didn't Teddy send his man to talk with my man to settle the issue? We can fix this up." Allegedly, he said that. Now, when Morgan met with President Roosevelt, the president stated in no uncertain terms there will be no compromise. The issue will be settled by the courts. Morgan was concerned about his other business interests being at risk. Roosevelt told him only the ones that had done anything wrong would be prosecuted. Now, in a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court ordered the breakup of Northern Securities. TR's reputation as a trust buster was solidified. Now, Roosevelt's philosophy was simple. As long as a trust provided good service at reasonable rates, he left it alone. It was a good trust. If a trust jacked up rates, exploited the consumers, then it was a bad trust, and he went after it. The only problem was Roosevelt was the one who decided if a trust was good or bad. That's Roosevelt. Okay, now the last C of Roosevelt's square deal was the FDA, the Federal Food and Drug Administration. Now, during the Spanish-American War, soldiers died from eating badly preserved meat or embalmed beef. Yeah, embalmed, like when you're dead. Now, 2 generals testified before Congress about this scandal. Now, the next thing, November 1901, children in St. Louis, Missouri and Camden, New Jersey died from tainted vaccines. Then, between 1902 and 1906, Dr. Harvey Wiley, chief chemist in the United States Department of Agriculture, conducted a study with a group of 12 volunteers. Yeah, 12 people volunteered, nicknamed the Poison Squad. They agreed to eat food laced with common preservatives of the time, such as, get this, formaldehyde. Okay, so we've had all these stuff happening in the last few years. Then, in February 1906, Upton Sinclair published The Jungle. This was an expose of the meatpacking industry. The public finally had enough. Sinclair blew the lid off the meatpacking industry's dangerous practices. Now, Roosevelt had Labor Commissioner Charles P. Neal and social worker James B. Reynolds do an inspection of the meatpacking plants. What they found supported what Sinclair had written about in his novel. Congress passed the Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act in June of 1906. Now, this was the beginning steps to safeguard the nation's food supply. Today, it is called the Food and Drug Administration. Theodore Roosevelt, the most famous progressive era president, used the power of the office of the president, also called the bully pulpit, very effectively. He supported workers' rights to organize, 8-hour workdays for federal employees, workers' compensation, and income and inheritance taxes on wealthy Americans. Now, under Roosevelt, the country's natural resources became a government mandate. He used the Bureau of Fisheries, the National Forest Service, to efficiently manage our natural resources for future generations of Americans. This short video only touches briefly on the life of Theodore Roosevelt. If you Google his name, you will get about 53 million hits. He was a politician, a historian, a naturalist, a scientist, an ornithologist. The man was amazing. Okay, anyways, the next video I will cover Presidents William Howard Taft and his contributions to the progressive era. Check out the links in the description for more information. Now remember, review your notes 5 to 10 minutes every day. The best thing you can do for a good grade, go to class and pay attention and take notes. Okay, if you like the video, click the thumbs up button, ring the bell, and please subscribe to my channel. Leaving a comment really helps supporting my channel. Thank you for watching.